Thank you for being here. Take time out.
Yeah, we do appreciate you.
You all want to just jump right in since he's a little short on time?
Yeah, let's just jump right in.
Yeah, definitely. So first we can talk briefly about what the University Innovation Fellows Program is. It's in partnership with Stanford University's Hassel-Plattner Institute of Design, and it basically encourages students like us to become agents of change in our university. And that's usually through innovation or entrepreneurship, but it doesn't necessarily have to be that. It's just mainly about observing our current environment and deciding what do we want to do to improve students and faculty alike. And our faculty champion is Dr. Shelton. So he's been with us through this 6-week intensive program where we essentially do some studies on the university to try to figure out, okay, what innovation climate do we already have and what can we do to improve it and further our advancement? Okay, perfect. So I wanted to talk about the Innovation Project Program and what inspired this project. I had conversations with a few other students, some instructors and the SGA president, and they noted that in many courses, there aren't a lot of room for innovation in the assignments. And so while we do encourage collaboration for projects, there isn't a lot of room to give avenues of creativity and developing something as a group. And so what I decided to do is to create the Innovation Project Program that's meant to give students an opportunity to pursue an alternative to a typical class project that an instructor might give. So just describing it briefly, an instructor will, for example, assign a project maybe in programming, and the student can choose to accept that, or they can approach the Innovation Project Program where they'll be assembled into groups of 3 or 5, and we'll assign ambassadors that are upperclassmen with a minimum of 3.0 GPA who've taken this course that will organize a meeting either virtually or in person and kind of like brainstorm with them and like sort of a fun session, maybe about an hour long, about what kind of project they'll have. And to make sure that it goes within the guidelines of the instructor will send some sort of loose set of guidelines for them to follow in order for them to get a good completion grade. And so after this, they'll work on this project. The options will be either to work in lieu of class time, so instead of class, or they can work outside of class. But if they do work within the class period, they have to meet with their ambassador just to make sure that they're going on the right track and that they're set to complete the project at its due date. And then once that's finished, it'll be turned in as a group and the instructor will grade it and give the same grade across the board for all team members. And so the benefits that I identified with this program is, of course, innovation. They have a chance to just like come together for an hour in that restrained time frame to try to figure out what project they want to pursue. Of course, the cooperation, because they have to suddenly meet up with like new people to gain it's a better cohesiveness, so they know how to team up with others in a very limited setting. And then finally, the teamwork and the networking that allows them to build bonds outside of the program once they're finished with the project, especially if they find something in common with each other. And that is the idea that I wanted to share with you. The first steps, I wanted to start small rather than just start big. I would start with maybe one class, perhaps programming 1. That's an entry-level course that most computer science majors take. And then after that, we just branch out to maybe first-year computer science courses if it goes well.
Would you all like to give any feedback to Isaiah about this?
I have some notes, but Dr. Corley, did you have anything that you wanted to say?
Well, first, I'd just say congratulations on your effort, Isaiah. One of the biggest things to making sure that learning occurs is really when you can become an active participant in your own learning process. So if you think about the way we used to learn and the way we learn today, the driver actually is you. So that day in which it used to simply be the teacher or the instructor or the professor, that kind of day is gone because we realized that we learn differently, right?
Right.
And so anytime you're talking about things like innovation and cooperation and networking, those are things that have something that you didn't necessarily mention, but you said it out loud. It has a motivating factor built in. And so I applaud your efforts in particular the framework that you kind of outlined, because those are the key components. If you look at learning in the 21st century, what makes the environment conducive for learning, you kind of hit it on the head when you talked about innovation, cooperation, and networking. But more importantly, the fact that this is coming from you all means that you want to be an active participant, and that has been by far, if you look at learning, you look at successful learning, you look at people who have been successful, that's been one of the biggest factors, attitude versus aptitude. So I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Mr. Gray, I know you kind of came on a bit later. Did you have any feedback or comments? Okay. So team, due to the sake of time, I want Dr. Corley to be able to hear as much as possible. We'll talk at the end. So I'm taking notes. We'll talk about each presentation that you all have to give, but let's move on to the next one for now.
There we go. Everybody can see the screen fine?
Yes, yes, we can.
Okay. To start off with, my project was mostly based around how students' learning environments have changed drastically over the course of the last 2 years concerning the pandemic. Let's see. Now, due to recent events occurring in the world, the learning environment for many students, as we all have known, has changed drastically. So some of the students have had trouble adapting to these learning environments, such as their grades suffering as a result, especially since the university restricted the pass or fail system, and a lot of students have concerns about that, how they'll affect their GPA taking certain classes. Now, a critical step in solving this issue is to give the students opinions themselves on the matter and what they ultimately have for themselves to take as a class, such as hybrid learning, in-person learning, or altogether online, because all their problems are unique to them. Now, this is how I propose that it could work possibly. First step would be to give students a survey that would give them the school data on what the preferred method of learning is. The survey will also ask for students resources, such as if they have a reliable internet connection, a laptop or computer at home, or a quiet place to learn and study in class. After the survey phase has been rolled out, the school can then take all this information and supply the necessary materials to students who prefer online learning. The students will also sign a liability form because, as you know, the school can't fund the cost of students without having some kind of safety net. So the students will sign liability forms that will hold them responsible for all lost or damaged items in order to uphold their integrity. The school should also take into account that they should get a surplus of materials for students that change their mind about their preferred method of learning over the course of the semester, such as some students may feel that they don't learn as well in hybrid or online as they would in person, or vice versa. So you want to take that into account. Now, over the course of the school year, this is where many students will have teachers or advisors to help them over the course of the semester. Their progress will be monitored, and then after that, their advisors could give them feedback on what the preferred method of learning is and give suggestions about handling the course and where they should make the switch to a different method of learning. Now, of course, some students might not thrive as well in certain classes, and it might not just be solely the learning environment. It just might be for that specific class. They might have to be online, in person, whatever you name it, because a lot of classes don't click as well for some students as it would for others. And finally, I have a link to the survey. I had a few students actually fill it out, and I believe I have some results. I'll try to click on this and show you a brief presentation of what the survey looks like. This is a kind of a draft survey, a test run, if you will. I've given out the survey to students, mostly freshmen in my dorm, and of course the honors program. Here's a brief presentation of that. And then I will try to pull up the survey results. Please excuse me for a moment. Now, surprisingly, a lot of students will prefer in-person learning rather than online or hybrid, mostly because of, as I said earlier, just the classes they're taking doesn't correspond to their specific learning environment, so they would have to be in person to easily learn the material. But there's also the outliers of students that would like online or in person, so I feel like the school could provide for them as well if they don't have the resources easily available to them. The survey will also cover why they chose this, how they feel the school could better it, and this will cover the resources that many students have. Now, the best course of action for many students that they feel that will work best with their schedule would be hybrid learning. But of course, from the first survey results, it would show that they prefer in-person overall anyway. So it's pretty interesting to see that students would prefer in-person rather than hybrid, even though it will work better for them. And after that, I conclude my presentation. If you would like to see any of the specific survey results, let me know.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Parham. So if we're going by receiving feedback after each presentation, Dr. Corley, anything?
Yeah, Christopher, excellent job again. One of the things that you really did, I don't know if you used the terminology, but when you look at an education environment, we do needs assessment. And so, you started off really looking at both the needs, meaning the learning modalities that students want to have, and also to make sure that the resources were in place to support the one that gave them the best opportunity, right? So, nowadays you hear a lot about the word equity when it comes to education. So that's actually a component of equity. Equity is providing every student what they need when they need it in order to be successful. So based on the needs assessment and the idea that some students learn better in person, while some students may have a work schedule where it benefits them and the way that they learn may be even better online or in a hybrid mode. Your talk of the assessment by the instructor, really, I think the assessment should occur almost every class period and definitely at every opportunity to do any type of grading or assessment. So that assessment isn't only on how the students are performing, that assessment is also on how we are performing, right? Because at the end of the day, if I have a class that everybody's failing, I don't want to wait to the end of the semester. I don't want to wait to midterm. I need to know really even before your first exam. That's why Jenny will give you a quiz to see if you got it, right? And then I have to go back and say, what is it that you need to do differently? What is it that I need to do differently? Because ultimately it takes two to learn, right? And to be in this teaching and learning environment, it takes both. So those are great comments. I did also understand and like the percentages, at least the data that you've been able to gather so far. And so it kind of speaks a lot about some of the uniqueness of our population. Again, across, there's a big broad spectrum of how people learn, right? And so based on, the data that you had, you basically said that more, almost half really prefer this direct contact face-to-face, right? But then you also had, almost another half who could manage in a hybrid or online fashion. And so as we continue now to meet the needs, that means the diversity of our offerings will continue to move in a direction which actually can meet the needs of all three, right? And so now I think this is great. I know that from the resource standpoint, the president talked about Chromebooks the other day. And even on your liability piece, one of the reasons he talked about Chromebooks is because he said, just in case something happens to it, nobody has to, it's not that nobody really has to go and try to track you down, right? And it's a whole lot easier in case it breaks. Instead of getting somebody to try to do maintenance, hey, just turn in that old one and get a new one, right? And so they're looking at these things as we speak right now. But I think this is very helpful because again, this is coming from you as the end user, which is actually very, very impactful. So I appreciate you for this and thanks for your leadership on it.
Sure. Oh, could I mention something also?
Sure.
When I was giving out the survey, I had a lot of trouble incentivizing giving it. So I feel like one way that I can guarantee there would be survey responses and results would be to incentivize RAs giving out the survey at the cost of a fine. Because I've seen them do it before for dorms that I personally live in. And we usually have these meetings about once every 3 weeks, I would say. So I feel like that's one good way to incentivize it. But on the other hand, it will also only encourage students that actually live on campus, and it won't affect the people that live off campus. So there has to be a better way to incentivize it for this school to get the results that they need.
Right. And so I think you hit on a couple points. So I was recently in a training program centered around learning, right? And they really talked about how do you create the environment that's conducive for learning. And so, you know, not only incentivizing, but also being able to build the relationships up with both students and professors so that we share that as a goal, that we want to make sure that we're doing the best, right? And so that means that as a student, as a learner, I have to be able to have a vehicle to say, hey, this way doesn't work for me, or this way is new, but I seem to learn better with it, right? And so those conversations in that venue, you talked about a survey, but I can only imagine that professors do that for each and every class. Department does that for each student within their classes. And then a college does that for every program, every student, and every faculty member. So then therefore we're all on the same page. And yes, we may have to incentivize, but I think once we are able to get everybody to understand that by working together like this, it opens the door now for better learning. It increases our ability to teach and to learn. And ultimately, I think we all could agree that's really what we're trying to do here, you know. So yes, I think incentives to help build that relationship to get everybody engaged. But I think ultimately it's something that would benefit everybody.
Yes, sir. Thank you for your feedback. I appreciate it. I will quickly make a note of this and I hand over to LaQuawne.
My name is LaQuawne DePriest, and I wanted to change the computer science curriculum to project-based learning over traditional learning. So if it loads, okay, there we go. So the Virginia State's computer science curriculum, to me, when I was sitting in a classroom, it showed that it kind of lacked applied real world skills that you'd be using within the career field. And I've also noticed that there's no real engagement to solve real world problems. So what project-based learning can do for Virginia State, project-based learning allows for a deeper understanding of computer science. It can create a fun learning environment. Students will be able to use creativity to not only solve real world problems, but also create fun projects in the classroom. It can also encourage collaboration within the classroom to solve a problem. Cons of traditional learning for computer science. Student focus is set in the wrong direction, taking notes instead of understanding and engrossing new ideas. Too much time spent on presentation and little time for practice. Lectures are usually one size fits all, so I kind of really wanted to change that so everyone can have their own type of project that they will work on that they can learn from and ask the teacher questions. How are they different? Project-based learning is multidisciplinary and often based on real-world tasks. It begins with instruction and ends with a presentation. It can also encourage students to interact with the teacher through check-ins. Traditional learning is often short-term, just aims to find a solution to a given problem, provides feedback upon student request or submission. How can we add it to VCU? not VCU, VSU. One way is we could flip the classroom. However, I'm aware that that could take an extremely long time. We could also create a career incubator designed to help students prepare for software jobs outside of school. But my favorite one is the one I think, since we already have something going on with the Virginia State's Coding Club, is to expand on the coding club itself. We could add to the current VSU coding club and design it to be similar to a career incubator, adding more resources over time. Example, teaching how to build a proper resume for the technology field, and also mock interviews for software engineering with the use of Leak Code and Code Wars. And that concludes my presentation.
Right. LaQuawne?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so no, a great presentation again. A couple of things, because I think you probably just went straight for the jugular.
Mhm.
So a couple of things. One is it seems that you assessed that you felt that the programs were outdated and non-authentic, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And in addition to that, from a motivational standpoint, you also stated that they weren't fun.
Right.
And so to sum up, when you say student focus, a student focused approach means it should be authentic. It should not be outdated. It should be actually relevant, right?
Mhm.
And it also should have some aspect of fun because it needs to motivate, right?
Right.
You also talked about career incubations and the ability to flip the classroom and some of the mock interview sessions, right?
Mhm.
And so for one, there are certain programs on campus that actually do these very well. So that means we wouldn't be reinventing the wheel. There are a lot that have problem-based learning that kind of build capacity. That's really what you're talking about. And they do it in a way that's engaging. So not only is it at a point where you have to remember something, but you actually have to learn why it's important, which becomes a driver for you to want to remember it so you can get to the next stage of application, right? And then you also linked back to some of the mainstream components when you talk about coding. You know, we have funded coding projects at the K-12 level. We have coding initiatives at the college level, and then you have these that have these, what you call it, when you get stackable credentials, they help you go straight into the workforce, right? So there's certain things that within even accredited programs with stackable credentials can give you that different level of engagement that makes you feel more into it, to serve as a motivating factor. I think all those things are doable. In fact, I think when you look at programs that really focus on being student-centered, they have that in them, because that's what motivates you. So as we started talking with Isaiah about you being an active participant in your own learning process, those are the ways that you actually accomplish that across the board. And I think all three of you all have really hit on to something that we do these things across the campus in various areas. A lot of it's pedagogy that you're talking about, right? How are we delivering or creating an environment for learning to occur, right? And so I think the feedback, that's what's really important, because you see what happens sometimes if our only feedback is how you performed on an assignment, that never gets us to really move the needle. And if it does, it's too late, right? Our ability to have this kind of feedback early in the process, which says, hey, maybe for next week, I need to be able to do something differently, right? Because whatever I'm saying right now, there's still a bridge that needs to be there. There's a gap, right? So if that means I need to take examples that you kind of relate to, we talk a lot about culturally responsiveness nowadays, right? You hear that? So what culturally responsiveness really means is that I'm able to take what you basically talked at some of the fundamentals, but align those to things that you understand and appreciate. So that then it becomes not just a fundamental, it becomes a part of your foundation. And then you understand the foundation and understand how it applies, right? So everything that you all are saying really centers around this. I just say, I think all three of you all are to be commended, and Dr. Shelton too, for your efforts. I think the next step is to continue this conversation with, I think you had your dean, right? And I'll share this conversation with him. I know it's recorded, but I'll also follow up. And I think he'd be very proud of you all. He'd be very proud of your efforts. Remember, leaders are people who do, right? Not people who sit back and complain, but people who do. And part of the thing that you all did today, not only did you do, but you also provided solutions. And so, I'll just say this, on behalf of everybody who you all invited who were not able to attend, you all did an excellent job. I think we'll follow this up. I know we'll follow this up. And I think you'll hear back from them very, very soon. So again, keep doing what you do. Everything you do not only makes you better, but it also makes Virginia State University better. All right, you all. Thank you. Thanks,
Thank you
Cameron.
so much.
Right. Thank you,
you so
Dr.
much.
Corley, for taking the time.
Take care.
You're welcome.
Right. Priest, Mr. Parham, Mr. Freeman, I'd like to give you my feedback now.
Okay.
All right. So first of all, Dr. Corley wasn't just gassing you all up. You all actually did do a very great job. From when you all spoke with myself and Dr. Lee, I feel like you've taken the work and you've put in the effort. I can tell just kind of hints of you all actually speaking with other people and trying to figure out what are some weak points. So and a lot of the notes that I had were just things. There are less there wasn't really any kind of criticism. I liked all of the ideas. I just want to give you all some feedback for things to consider and things that I'd want a bit of clarification on. So first, let's start with Mr. Freeman's presentation. So down to the details. I like the idea of having an upperclassman be the ambassador, but thinking about incentive, because I know upperclassmen, especially those who are very productive, while they definitely have the means to serve as an ambassador, the question is, do they have the time? Have you been able to give any thought yet as to what perks an upperclassman would be able to receive in order to incentivize them towards being an ambassador?
Not to take away from Isaiah, but we talked about this at our last presentation, and we went over how they could put leadership qualities on their resume, how they mentor younger people towards their projects.
Right.
And
Something else. Oh, go on.
One thing that I thought of recently is that I noticed that, because me and Christopher are in the honors program, and they have what's called a service award, where they basically assign you to do some sort of task or work with someone in the campus. And so I was thinking maybe we could make that a part of the service award program, where we have honor students becoming ambassadors for students who are already taking a course that they've taken as well, to sort of create projects with them.
Wonderful. Okay. Well, that's great. I mean, again, this wasn't me trying to pick holes. I was literally wondering what thoughts you've given to that. So yeah, I like that a lot. And as you mentioned, Mr. Parham, I was thinking about that as well, even a step beyond just listing down leadership skills in a resume, if there's any type of certificate that could be created, because anybody can create a certificate and it would be a demonstrable feat. So that might be something to consider. And then my last comment for that first project, I saw you mention 3.0 GPA. I know 3.0 is the minimum to being an honor student. Something else that I'd want you to consider, you have cumulative GPA and you have major GPA. The reason I bring this up is because you might have some students who are highly capable. Well, I'll put it like this. The reason you may want to consider looking at major GPA, which means just the GPA of all of the courses that are related to one's major, versus cumulative GPA, which includes all of the general education courses, is if you need an ambassador who's highly technically competent, but may have had a bad run of things in some of the general education courses, their GPA may not reflect what they know. It's most likely not too big of an issue, but that might be something that you want to think about as well.
Right, thank you.
Yep. Okay, so second project. So this was about the student course survey and analysis. So one of the questions I had, because there are a lot of things about the preferred learning style of students. And the learning styles that I know of, you have like kinetic learning, so learning through actions and doing. You've got other types of learning where it's okay just to walk through scenario problems versus those who can just pick it up by getting the raw variables and just data. The survey that I saw, the draft survey that you showed, seemed to be related to distance learning versus face-to-face or in-person learning. If the school decides to go back to fully in person, and the way things are looking, I'm not sure, I doubt that's going to happen, but just in case, is there any way to make this project still relevant? So rather than talking about what's your preference, hybrid or virtual or in person, could there be things along the lines of the kinetic learning versus some of these other learnings? And I can look it up if you don't have any idea what I'm talking about, but is that something that you've thought about?
Well, most of what I've thought about has been how, due to the pandemic, learning has, as a result, changed worldwide, nationally even. Like, you can't just erase the last few years and say we're doing away with virtual learning completely. It will still exist in the future no matter what you do. So I just want to kind of prepare the school for that kind of future where it doesn't go away and it will still be here. So that way students could be more adept in their method of learning. But I understand what you're saying about kinetic learning as well, like visual learning, hands-on, that kind of thing.
Mhm.
So I feel like that could work as well. But I don't know how you implement hands-on learning if students were like virtual across the country, for example. It might be a bit difficult to provide them the resources unless you had that kind of survey available.
Right. The hypothetical I gave you was just assuming that we did away with any type of virtual learning. But I do agree that it's most likely going to be around. And again, the 4 learning styles, when you first started mentioning about learning, I thought you were referring to just kind of visual, auditory, reading and writing, and kinesthetic, which is that physical hands-on. I'll put this link in the chat because that might be something that you may want to consider. And the reason I say that is because the virtual versus face-to-face, I'm not sure how long that's going to stick around. It might be around the entire time you're here, but that might be something that we want to consider revamping. But that was the only feedback that I had about that one. Other than that, I think that's a pretty good idea. The logistics of getting funding to get supplies to support different types of learning. Okay, well, let me ask you this. Have you thought about, for the survey, bringing in an expert in education? I know Dr. Cheryl Talley, she's in psychology, but her background's in education, and we have education professors here as well, those who went to school for education. That it might be worthwhile finding a person like that, and you can reach out to myself and any other faculty in computer science to reach out to who they know to get them to look at your survey and just kind of hear your idea and offer any suggestions.
Okay.
So yeah, Mr. Parham, let's maybe, if that's something that you want to dig into deeper, Cheryl Talley is the person I'm thinking of. I have a good working relationship with her. If we can formalize the idea that you have, just kind of get it down in writing, and you may already have that, then we can kind of present it to her and just ask for her feedback. That might be very beneficial.
Could you drop her email in the chat if you would, please?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. At esu.edu. Let me make sure I spelled that right. And that should be it. Absolutely. Let me just sanity check, make sure that C Talley. And I forgot how to type all of a sudden. Yes, C Talley at vsu.edu. Okay. And then the final one, the project incubator. It sounds like, from what I recall, have you all already been in discussions with, let's say, Mariah Simmons or those who are heading up the club? Because I've heard kind of murmurings about coming up with different projects. I don't know if it's coincidence or if you've all already started speaking. So have you all already had conversations?
The only conversation we've had recently is that we're trying to make a to-do list or something like that using C#. My idea is pretty much like maybe we could expand it a little further into different languages, adding in like mock coding interviews, because like with Google, Amazon, and Netflix and stuff like that, you kind of want to know what they're going to ask or have an idea of what they're going to ask. Know it will be ahead of you right after you get out of school. So my initial thought process, like, yeah, again, we can expand on the coding club as a whole, because when I was making this presentation, I was like, wait a minute, we don't even have to flip the classroom. If we already have a coding club on the campus, all we have to do is just completely make that idea bigger. So that was pretty much what I was going through in my head when I was designing it.
Okay. So if I'm trying to put Mr. Parham in touch with Dr. Talley, I think it'd be best to put you in touch with Mariah Simmons. I don't know if you had her for any. Yeah, you're in her class, aren't you?
Yeah, I was in her class. Yeah.
Right. So she is currently taking point on the club that's being created, kind of the I guess you can call it a coding club. They meet on Wednesdays in the evening time. So the ideas that you're talking about, that's exactly what she's looking for. That's why I asked if you've already been talking with her, because she's been talking about wanting to have projects that students can work on. And if you're talking about having projects that are specifically tailored to give hands-on experience with industry, then that would be ideal. So for you, Mr. DePriest, I'll put, well, I mean, I don't know why I'm doing this. I'm pretty sure you have her email address.
Yeah,
I
I have her on GroupMe and everything. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's right. So
Yeah.
you can even try to reach out to her. I would recommend email or GroupMe, whatever you think is the best form of communication, and explain that. You can CC me on it if you are sending an email, just to explain your ideas and kind of what you want to do to help out with the coding club.
One more question. So do you think, well, I'm not sure if you think the idea is really that good or not, but do you think there's things that could be changed within my design for the presentation?
So are you asking specifically about how you presented it?
Yeah, how I presented it, and is there anything that could really be changed to make it better?
Okay, so my recommendation, just from what I recall, you were talking about the classroom at first, and then you went off into coding club. I don't know if your intent is to go with both, but when you're presenting, I'm almost thinking maybe you want to present with regards to the coding club, and having projects that help with industry experience and whatnot. And the reason I say that is because it will be a larger ask to try to change up a classroom. I don't think the professors would be unwilling to work with you within some of the higher level classes, but coming up with the projects, well, let me ask, what kind of timeline are we working with? These projects that you all are proposing, do these need to be started up by next semester?
They did not have to be started up by next semester. Probably September of next year.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So that time actually helps then, because I was going to say trying to propose some relevant projects for courses for next semester might be a tall order. Professors typically have something in mind when the semester begins. The coding club would be a little bit more flexible, so that's why I was going to suggest just kind of focus on that. But a lot of faculty that you present to, like, let's say Dr. Hiley, if you mentioned trying to make changes within a classroom, it's a little bit more difficult to do so than if we were talking about a club. So maybe from the initial, you want to talk about the club, and then you explain that you have ideas to move on into modifying the classrooms if the model in the club works. So you can kind of consider what you would do in the club, whatever projects would be proposed, the interview, help, what have you, as kind of the prototype. And if that works out, you can kind of say that you're going to observe how it goes and then iron out the wrinkles. And then in the spring, in the fall semester, fall 2022, then you would try to work with the professor over the summer beforehand to see how you can take the things that you applied in the coding club into a classroom for the fall semester. Maybe start with one classroom. So that way it's not like, oh, we're immediately trying to change up classrooms, but we're testing something and we'll revamp it and apply it in the classroom. That sounds a little bit safer.
Okay. I appreciate the feedback.
Yeah, absolutely. And that actually brings up another point I forgot to mention. So Mr. Freeman, I think it's Mr. Down to the details. I was talking about doing some, yes, okay, this is what it was. I can't remember if this was from the survey or from the, I think it was the ambassador project, but you mentioned the CS courses, and I think you mentioned how you might start with one and then maybe try to grow it out. I think if it works in CS, you could even potentially try to grow that same model out in different departments. So I don't think you have to stop it at CS courses. You can even allude to tangentially related the majors and departments, like let's say from computer science, if things work out in comp sci, move to computer engineering and manufacturing engineering and electrical. Those are pretty close by, and then just slowly try to spread the program out. Now it may or may not work out like that. I mean, that is a pretty tall ask, but people like kind of seeing that for future work. So you can specifically call that future direction if the initial approach works. But yeah, that's all the feedback that I have to give for now. Other than that, you all legitimately did a wonderful job.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Appreciate you.